The sun burned high and brilliant above the Santa Monica Pier, spilling golden light over the wooden planks that stretched above the restless Pacific. The pier pulsed with life that afternoon, each corner alive with sound, color, and movement. Children squealed with delight as they tugged their parents toward the rides. Teenagers laughed in clusters, their phones snapping selfies against the backdrop of the glittering Ferris wheel. Couples leaned lazily against the railings, watching the turquoise water churn and crash below. Street musicians strummed guitars and blew into saxophones, their music competing with the cries of gulls circling overhead. Vendors called out their offerings: caramel corn, saltwater taffy, hot dogs, funnel cakes, and the smell of sugar and grease mingled with the briny tang of the sea. It was a scene of joy, of families and friends making memories under the wide Californian sky. Yet just off to the side of the carousel, where the painted horses rose and dipped in their endless loops, a girl sat still, alone, trying not to be noticed. Her name was Marissa Hart, 19 years old, brown hair that curled at her shoulders in loose waves, eyes the color of wet earth after rain. She wore a simple cotton blouse tucked into faded jeans and a pair of sneakers that, no matter how clean, were destined never to touch the planks beneath her. Because beneath her body was a chair, chrome and black leather, polished carefully, though one wheel squeaked faintly when she moved. Marissa had been living with the chair for just under a year, though to her it sometimes felt as though time had folded in on itself, warping before and after into one unbroken ache. She had been driving home late one night after a shift at the diner where she worked weekends. She had been thinking about her upcoming art class, the paintbrushes waiting for her on her desk, the way she wanted to capture the sunset she had glimpsed in her rearview mirror. She remembered the blare of headlights that weren't supposed to be there, the screech of metal twisting, the sharp snap of her own scream, and then silence, the silence that still haunted her dreams. When she woke in the hospital, the world below her waist was gone, replaced by a numbing stillness. Doctors explained what had happened, but she could only hear the sound of the machines beeping, counting seconds of a life she hadn't agreed to. And yet, despite the grief and the fury that still came in waves, Marissa loved the pier. She came often, sometimes with her older sister, sometimes with friends, sometimes alone. It was here that she could feel the ocean's breath on her cheeks, hear the mixture of languages from tourists and locals, and remember that the world was bigger than her loss. She could watch the Ferris wheel turn slowly against the sky, and for a moment, she almost felt like she was moving with it. But no matter how she tried to lose herself in the colors and sounds, there was always one thing she couldn't escape: people's eyes. Strangers often looked at her chair before they looked at her face. Their glances darted, sometimes pitying, sometimes curious, sometimes sharp with the discomfort of people who didn't know what to say. Marissa had grown skilled at pretending not to notice, but every stare carved its own mark. That day, though, she had promised herself something. She wouldn't let fear chase her from this place she loved. She wouldn't let the chair define the way she belonged in the crowd. She told herself she would roll across the pier, buy herself a lemonade from the stand with the striped awning, and sip it while listening to the guitarists near the railing. She would let the sun warm her skin and she would feel normal just for an afternoon. For a while it worked. She moved slowly through the pier, the wheels gliding smoothly beneath her hands. She stopped near the edge to watch surfers in the distance, dark figures cutting across the glittering waves. She let the laughter of children wrap around her, allowed herself to breathe it in as if it could patch the cracks in her heart. But normalcy has a way of slipping, fragile as glass. And that afternoon, it shattered. 3 young men were making their way down the pier, loud enough that people turned to look. They were the kind of men who moved like they owned space, their laughter edged with challenge, their steps heavy with the desire to be noticed. One wore a floral shirt unbuttoned halfway down his chest, tattoos spilling over his collarbones and winding down his arms. He strutted with his shoulders back, chin lifted, as though daring anyone to question him. The other 2 wore denim vests, frayed and stained with patches sewn into the fabric. They jostled each other, shoving, making crude jokes that sent them into barking laughter. At first, Marissa didn't notice them. She was looking at a balloon artist twisting long tubes into the shape of a giraffe for a small child. But then the sound of their laughter shifted. It sharpened, directed. She could feel it on her skin before she even saw them. When she turned her head, they were already watching her. And their smiles weren't kind. They approached like circling dogs, each step deliberate, calculated. People in the crowd glanced over, sensing something wrong, but no one stepped closer. The man in the floral shirt was the first to lean down toward her. His shadow cut across her lap. His grin widened, showing teeth. "Move!" he said. The words sliced through her like a blade. Simple. Cruel. Marissa's throat tightened. Her fingers gripped the wheel of her chair so tightly that her knuckles blanched. She had heard whispers before, cruel murmurs behind her back in grocery stores, mocking laughter in parking lots. But this was different. This was loud. Public. Directed at her like a spotlight. Before she could even form a response, the man let out a laugh and swung his boot against the side of her chair. The impact jolted through her body, rattling metal against wood. Her chair rocked sideways, wheels skidding dangerously near the edge of the planks. She gasped, one hand shooting to the railing of her chair, the other clutching desperately at the wheel to steady herself. For a heartbeat, she thought she would topple onto the pier's boards. Around them, people had turned. Some slowed their steps, some frowned. But none moved forward. Their silence was louder than the bullies' laughter. Marissa's heart plummeted. Not from the kick, not even from the jeers, but from the confirmation that when cruelty was loud, kindness so often chose quiet. The man in the floral shirt leaned closer, sneering. "What's the matter? Bet you can't even stand up without someone helping you." One of the denim-vested men bent double with laughter, slapping his knee as though it was the funniest thing he'd ever heard. The other pointed at her, his laughter sharp and ugly. Every word chipped at her. She wanted to scream, to tell them to stop, but her voice caught in her throat. Her arms, usually strong from months of pushing herself, felt heavy, like stone. Her vision blurred with the sting of unshed tears. She wanted to disappear. She wanted to roll herself far, far away, but her body refused to obey. And then from somewhere beyond the pier came a sound. Low at first, a faint vibration beneath the wooden planks. Rumble. It grew louder, a steady growl that rolled through the air like approaching thunder. The laughter faltered. Heads turned toward the street leading onto the pier. One by one, motorcycles appeared, their chrome flashing like mirrors under the Californian sun. Dozens of them. The engines roared, deep and resonant, rattling the boardwalk with their power. The sound grew until it seemed the ocean itself was trembling. They came in formation, a sea of black leather and polished steel. Men and women alike, their faces weathered by sun and wind, their arms inked with stories. Some wore sunglasses that hid their eyes. Others carried looks so fierce it made people step aside without being asked. Boots struck the wood in rhythm as they parked their bikes and dismounted. The pier suddenly filled with their presence. The bullies froze. Their grins drained into unease. The floral-shirted man glanced left, then right, as though measuring escape routes. But there were too many. The bikers advanced in silence, their boots a drumbeat that echoed against the laughter that had gone still. Marissa could hardly breathe. She had never seen anything like it. They seemed larger than life, a wall of strength moving as one. The crowd, which only moments before had looked away, now stared openly, phones lifted to capture what was unfolding. At their front walked a man taller than the rest, his beard silver against his sun-darkened skin. His eyes were calm, but in them burned a fury so tightly leashed it was terrifying. He stopped just feet away from the bullies, folding his arms across his chest. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The silence stretched, thick as the heat. Behind him, the other bikers fanned out, their bodies forming a barrier around Marissa. She sat at the center of their circle, her heart pounding, her hands trembling against the wheels of her chair. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel exposed. She felt shielded. The bullies shuffled back, their bravado collapsing under the weight of that many eyes. One muttered something under his breath, but his voice cracked. Another tugged on the arm of the man in the floral shirt, urging him to retreat. The leader's glare never wavered. His silence was louder than a shout. It said everything. You will not touch her again, and the message landed. Slowly the bullies backed away, their swagger gone, their heads ducked like scolded children. They slipped into the crowd and vanished, leaving behind the echo of their cruelty like smoke dispersed by wind. Only then did the leader turn. His expression softened as he crouched, lowering himself to Marissa's level. He rested his arms on his knees, his gaze steady, kind. "You're safe now," he said, his voice gravelly yet warm. Marissa blinked hard, tears spilling over the rims of her eyes. She nodded, unable to speak. Around her, the bikers smiled, some giving her thumbs up, others gently patting her chair in quiet reassurance. Not one of them looked at her with pity. Not one of them treated her like she was fragile. They saw her, truly saw her. The Ferris wheel spun lazily behind them. The ocean breeze carried the salt and the cries of gulls overhead. And in that moment, what had begun as cruelty transformed into something else entirely. Compassion, courage, protection. The crowd erupted into applause. Parents clapped, children cheered, strangers reached out to squeeze Marissa's shoulder. Phones had captured every second, but what lingered most wasn't the videos or the cheers. It was the warmth in her chest, the sense that for once the world hadn't stayed silent. In the days that followed, the footage of that moment spread across the internet. Millions watched as a circle of bikers surrounded a girl in a wheelchair, silencing cruelty without raising a single hand. People shared their own stories, times when someone had defended them or when they regretted their own silence. The story grew beyond Marissa, becoming a symbol of what humanity could be at its best. As for Marissa, she carried that day in her heart like a lantern. The memory of boots striking wood, of a wall of strength forming around her, of eyes that saw her not as broken but as worthy. These became her armor. For the first time since the accident, she didn't feel small. She didn't feel weak. She felt seen. She felt strong, and she knew deep in her bones that kindness could protect.